There's a skeleton buried in the Peruvian desert that scientists can barely lift. Not because it's large, though it is, but because it's so dense, so impossibly heavy, that a single vertebra requires multiple people just to move it. The creature it belonged to may have weighed twice as much as a blue whale, and it lived in an ocean that vanished millions of years ago. But that's just the beginning, because the story of Earth's oceans isn't just about what exists now. It's about the alien worlds that came before, worlds where deserts were deadly seas, where the deepest parts of the ocean harbored life so strange it rewrote the rules of biology itself. Today, we're traveling through 3 impossible oceans. One that defied the limits of size, one that shouldn't have existed at all, and one so dark and bizarre that it might as well be on another planet. What we're about to discover will make you question everything you thought you knew about the water that covers our world. Peru, 2023. A team of paleontologists stands in the desert, staring at something that shouldn't exist. They've just unearthed fragments of a creature so dense, so fundamentally different from anything alive today, that it breaks the rules. Meet Perucetus, colossus, the bone giant. Now, when you think of the heaviest animal ever, your mind goes straight to the blue whale, right? 100 tons of muscle and blubber, the undisputed champion of mass on planet Earth. But Perucetus, this prehistoric whale, might just steal that crown. Here's where it gets wild. While blue whales achieved their size through blubber and tissue, Perucetus took a completely different approach. Its bones were so incredibly dense, so packed with mineral, that they were more like living ballast than skeleton. Each vertebra weighed as much as a small car. Some scientists estimate this creature tipped the scales at potentially 200 tons, double a blue whale. But why? Why would evolution create something so impossibly heavy? The answer lies in its lifestyle. Perucetus likely spent its days cruising the shallow coastal waters of ancient Peru, using its tremendous weight to stay submerged, hovering just above the ocean floor like a massive, slow-moving vacuum cleaner. Modern manatees do something similar, though they're absolutely tiny by comparison. Imagine watching it move, this colossal shadow gliding through turquoise waters, disturbing clouds of sediment with each subtle movement. No speed, no agility, just pure gravitational dominance. But here's the haunting part. This ocean world that Perucetus inhabited, this realm of giants feeding in warm, shallow seas, it's gone, completely vanished. The tectonic forces that created its paradise eventually destroyed it, lifting the seabed into the Andes Mountains, leaving these bones stranded in the desert like evidence of a world that never was. And Perucetus wasn't alone in finding paradise in unexpected places, because roughly 100 million years before Perucetus evolved, another ocean existed in an even more impossible location. An ocean so vast, so teeming with predators, that it makes modern seas look almost empty by comparison. An ocean in the middle of what would become the world's largest desert. Close your eyes and picture the Sahara Desert. Endless dunes, scorching heat, not a drop of water for thousands of miles. Now rewind about 50 to 100 million years and watch as that desert floods. Welcome to the Trans-Saharan Seaway, an ancient ocean that cut through the heart of Africa like a watery knife, connecting the Mediterranean to the equatorial Atlantic. Where sand dunes stand today, massive waves once crashed. Where tourists now search for shade, prehistoric monsters once hunted. The fossil record here reads like a fever dream. Giant lungfish that could swallow a human whole. Sea snakes as thick as telephone poles, hunting in packs through mangrove forests. And perhaps most terrifying of all, catfish the size of cars, their whisker-like barbels twitching through murky water as they searched for prey. These weren't just big fish, they were apex predators in an ecosystem unlike anything that exists today. Some of these catfish grew to nearly 20 feet long, with mouths that could engulf a full-grown human in one bite. They lurked in the shallow channels between ancient islands, ambush predators in a world where the line between land and sea constantly shifted. But the true rulers of this seaway were the reptiles. Massive crocodilians called sarcosuchus, 50-foot-long behemoths with skulls as long as a human is tall. These weren't just crocodiles. They were something more terrifying, something evolution hasn't bothered to recreate, because nothing today requires that level of predatory power. Picture the scene. A herd of early dinosaurs approaches the water's edge to drink. The surface appears calm, almost inviting. Then, in an explosion of water and ancient fury, 10 tons of sarcosuchus launches from the depths, jaws wide enough to engulf prey whole. The impact sends water 20 feet into the air. By the time the spray settles, the shoreline is empty again. This wasn't a peaceful ocean. This was a battlefield where everything was either hunting or being hunted, where the warm, shallow waters created a pressure cooker of evolution, forcing life to adapt in increasingly extreme ways. But like all oceans, the Trans-Saharan Seaway was temporary. Continental drift, that slow-motion dance of tectonic plates, gradually closed the channels. The water receded. The monsters died. And over millions of years, sand buried the evidence of this lost world beneath billions of tons of desert. Today, paleontologists occasionally find their remains, a shark tooth here, a giant vertebra there, silent testimony to an ocean that time forgot. Yet while ancient oceans vanish and prehistoric giants fade into fossils, our modern seas hide creatures just as strange, just as impossible, just as alien. You just have to know where to look, or rather, how deep to dive. 3,000 feet below the ocean's surface, the world transforms into something that seems designed by a science fiction writer having a particularly strange day. Down here, in the perpetual darkness of the deep sea, life evolved without sunlight, without color, without any of the rules that govern the world above. Let me introduce you to the harp sponge. And yes, it's exactly as bizarre as it sounds. While most sponges sit passively on the ocean floor, filtering microscopic food from the water, this creature decided to become a predator. Its branches spread out like a harp made of living tissue, each one covered in tiny hooks and barbs. Small crustaceans drift by in the darkness, bump into a branch, and suddenly find themselves trapped, slowly enveloped by the sponge's tissue, and digested alive, a carnivorous sponge. Let that sink in. Evolution looked at the most passive group of animals on Earth and said, what if we made them hunters? But the harp sponge is almost conventional compared to what else drifts through these depths. The Tomopterus worm, for instance, a creature so bizarre it looks like it's performing an eternal ballet in the void. Its paddle-like fins undulate in perfect rhythm, pushing it through the water in movements so graceful, so hypnotic, that researchers initially thought they were watching something dancing rather than swimming. And when threatened, it releases clouds of bioluminescent particles that glow like yellow fireworks, presumably to confuse predators, though in the absolute darkness of the deep, what that actually accomplishes remains a mystery. Then there's the vampire squid, possibly the most misunderstood creature in the ocean. Its name conjures images of a blood-sucking monster, something to fear. The reality? It's a gentle scavenger, drifting through the water, with its webbed arms spread like a living parachute, collecting marine snow, the constant rain of dead organisms and waste that falls from the waters above, When startled, it turns itself inside out, exposing rows of harmless fleshy spines that make it look threatening without actually being dangerous. It's all bluff, all theater. The vampire squid survived the mass extinction that killed the dinosaurs by perfecting the art of eating garbage in the dark. There's a lesson somewhere in that. These creatures exist in a realm where pressure would crush a human instantly, where temperatures hover just above freezing, where food is so scarce that evolution created the biological equivalent of special effects just to survive. They've been down here for millions of years, hidden in the last unexplored frontier on Earth, waiting patiently for us to develop technology advanced enough to discover them. From Perucetus, drifting through vanished coastal waters, to sea monsters prowling through a Sahara that no longer exists, to alien creatures hunting in the eternal darkness of the abyss. Our oceans contain multitudes of worlds, most of which we'll never see. The blue whale might still be the longest animal that ever lived, but the heaviest. That title might belong to a creature whose world disappeared millions of years ago, leaving only bones in the desert as proof it ever existed. And somewhere, 3,000 feet down, in darkness so complete it has its own name, a sponge is hunting, a worm is dancing, a squid is surviving on garbage, completely unconcerned with our human definitions of possible and impossible. The ocean doesn't care what we think we know. It just keeps its secrets, buried in the depths, waiting for us to dive deeper.